the nature of your emergency?
Welcome back to the Talk to Living podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Walton, joined by Sergeant Walton. Glenn, how are you?
I'm really good.
There's somebody in our Police, Fire, Military, and Families Facebook group who was mentioning just kind of a lot of the trauma that continues to come up despite how long it's been since her dad has passed away. And I couldn't have empathized with this more because there have been many moments where all of a sudden just out of the blue, something happens to where I get that sensation of emotion that just floods over me because of the loss of my mom. And I think that when you're a first responder, you might not realize that there is something called an echo trauma. And an echo trauma is when you'll have a memory resurface or even an emotion that psychologically, like we're not currently correlating that particular emotion to an event that had happened, but you'll have these intrusive memories too that will pop up. And a lot of the times they stem from trauma. And I hate to say that this always happens because of unresolved trauma, because that's not always the case. Our body keeps the score, right? I talk about that book so much, and it's so true because it's there for a reason. And sometimes we don't always understand it. You might not be in any kind of relatable situation to that event, but for some reason, your body, your subconscious decided that this emotion needed to exist in that moment. And it's there for a reason. And a lot of the times it's to protect us, or it might be neurologically that we're making these connections because I don't know, I'll use the most surface level example, but maybe a particular song was playing in the background during that traumatic event. And right now you're hearing that same song and you might not still even remember that song was playing to begin with, but your body and your mind do.
Yeah, it's you can have these triggers, these things that come up for you in the most strange times, and it's really weird, especially if you're watching a movie and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, what just happened there? Or you have, like Ashley said, it's playing, having that song playing, you're like, oh, this is a strange dynamic. Something that's really weird for me, and I know I wasn't there, but this is one thing that I like. It's like a visualization type thing that it's nuts. It like literally felt like I was there. But when I have the song California Dreamin' playing, like I almost every time I hear that song, I visualize driving through this neighborhood in San Bernardino where there's Christmas lights all around me and that song's playing. But then it breaks me away to like I'm hanging out a helicopter door in Vietnam holding a machine gun. Like it's weird. It's really a strange dynamic with that.
So that's actually called vicarious trauma. And for you, that makes perfect sense because you love all things history, and you expose yourself to a lot of content, books, and literature that revolves around, every war, really.
Mm-hmm. And I never even considered that. And it's really interesting to think about. And it's like every time around Christmas, I start seeing Christmas lights start going up. And if I drive through that specific neighborhood, like, I don't care what I'm listening to on the radio, like that song starts playing in my head. And it's really strange.
When you're a first responder in particular, something like a noise or a smell or a setting or even a car backfiring or a siren in the distance, it might instantly send you into that mental shift mode, revisiting a call in your mind over and over. Even if it's years later, it could be that you're questioning what you could have done differently. That's all a sign of a trauma echo.
Having those, and like this is something that I learned a long time ago. It's, I sit here and I say, what's the worst traffic accident you've seen? What's the worst homicide you've seen? What's the worst? And I could just go through a list of different crimes, and I guarantee as you're listening to it, in your brain, your mind automatically went to the worst one that you've witnessed, that you've been to, that it might not have been the worst, but it was the one that impacted you the most. And that's how just our brain works. And that's where you're having that repetitiveness. It comes up for you, and it's being able to address it and deal with it to where you're not doing it in an unhealthy way. You find those habits and you find those outlets to be able to let you process that information without having to experience a physical trauma associated to it for yourself.
Something too that could be an example of this is if you have a hard time sleeping or even waking up early, even when you notice that there's nothing about the day that feels particularly urgent, it's because your nervous system might think that there is. You might have strong emotional reactions to super minor events because they echo something from the field, or even avoid family events or social settings because your brain still expects some sort of danger, even though, of course, there probably isn't.
Yeah, you're starting to recognize, especially like if I can think of it this way, is, going to as many homicides as I have, and going to as many of those incidents where most of them occur in a party type setting, especially the old school days of, the gang shootings, all that stuff. You're going to that stuff, and you start having this dynamic is like, I don't want to go to one of those. I don't want to get shot. And I think that's something to recognize, to say, well, I'm not going to an instance like that.
For me, one of these has actually been an avoidance concept of not going into hospitals. I spent so many days and nights and weeks even living in hospitals with my mom during cancer treatment and, post surgeries and things like that. And so I can only think of 2 times, one, my dad having hernia surgery, and 2, you having surgery after my mom had passed away, that I've actually been in a hospital. We've had people in hospitals, friends, people that probably would have been nice if I went to go visit, but because of that avoidance, I deliberately, I don't want to, I have germophobia really bad anyways. And so even before that, I wouldn't regularly visit a hospital, but that's information, right? It's self-acknowledgement of like, there's something we need to work on here.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that recognition is always that first, okay, this is something that I need to work on. But being able to affect that change, being able to get out of your comfort zone, and being able to handle it to where you're not having that emotional trigger, that emotional response to a situation like that is super important, and to be able to change that dynamic for yourself if you want to.
Something else that I think is important is to find that person, we have debriefs all the time, you and I. So for us, it would be one another who you might be able to share, like, hey, I just had this weird deja vu, or this feeling come up, or like my heart started racing when this song came on, and have a discussion around it. There's a lot of times where unintentionally you and I have had these conversations, and I might remember something about a conversation we had that you don't, and I might say something like, oh, I wonder if it's because, and then, oh, whoa, like I didn't even connect those two.
Yeah. And it's funny because we've had those conversations a lot, to where we're talking about it and we regularly talk about whatever dynamic it may be. And then you piece things together, or I piece things together, and we're like, whoa, that is amazing. And then you recognize it. And it's funny because after you connect, it's like you have those brain channels that you connect, and then it goes away.
So here's the thing, that's called a cognitive loop. And so in particular, so if it's something that happens and it's so much information that it's something that you're thinking about, especially if you decide to share it with somebody else, and especially if this is something that's happened more than once, to where this thought process is coming up, your brain, just like repeating a song in your head over and over again, it's trying to close that cognitive loop. So what we need to do here is to just talk it out. You can write out what happens. You can name the story. You can help your brain to recontextualize the event rather than just letting it replay uncontrollably without a start to end.
Yeah. And once it connects, it goes away. And it doesn't mean it's gone forever. It goes away for that moment, and it goes away because now you have a connection to where it's not going to play on that endless loop in your mind.
Something else too that is really important when I see, I'm just going to pick at police wives who are constantly bringing up stories of the past, or like have something that they're continuously going back to, or sharing arguments with their spouses on Instagram, for example, then to me, all that means is that they don't have something that they're that belongs to them, that they're exposed to, so much to the extent that it allows them to be able to anchor themselves in the present. And that's why that past continues to come up. And that's why it's so important to have hobbies and social connections and family rituals, but most importantly, things that just belong to you, because they're going to become this counterweight to any of those echoes.
Yeah, being able to have something that identifies you as you, especially outside of your work, outside of outside of being a husband, a father, whatever you may, first names that come to your mind when someone asks, who are you? That's where if you create that dynamic, because ultimately, if you don't know who you are as an individual too, it's going to be hard for anyone else to recognize you as that individualized person.
When echoes live in your body, I feel like they truly do steal your peace. And it's not about forgetting. I think it's about just reclaiming the present and repairing your nervous system so that you can move forward with integrity and with strength, because you're definitely worthy of that. I hope you've gotten some value out of today's episode. If you have, do us a favor, drop a review, subscribe down below. And as always, know that I'm sending you a long, tight hug from my home to yours.